If you're just tuning in, I'm the transition expert. And what I do for the most part is to help clients that are going through life changing events. Usually, I get the call when something happens, something's going to happen, or something needs to happen. We've transitioned over 1,000 families in the past 12 years, and most of the time, our clients contact us to help them get over a number of hurdles that maybe they're dealing with, both mentally, physically, and emotionally. Today's guest on the show is Kathy Harder. Kathy, are you with me?
I am Brandon.
All right, perfect. So, Kathy, if you can sort of go into what happened or what transpired with your family to make you start to look out for assistance or services.
My in-laws live down the road from me, and they've lived in the same house for 50 years. Raised their family there, and just collected a ton of stuff, and it never really got cleaned anything out, and so it was just a lot in the house. Old country kind of farmhouse,
Mhm.
and my in-laws are currently 85 and 79. And after my father-in-law retired, they bought an RV and loved traveling around. Um, they got a little bit in over their head, I think, with the RV, and then the market kind of tanked in '08, '09, was it? And he panicked and pulled out his money from his investments and lost more money. And so he was in this where he was pretty financially secure. Now he was not so secure. And so uh, he apparently started trying to do kind of some quick get rich sort of investment things, which caused him to lose more money.
What were some of those investments that he invested in?
Um, kind of pyramid sort of schemes, like one of my favorites. I don't know if I can mention names in here, but it was being kind of billed as a competitor to Amazon. Um, and Amazon already existed, and so I didn't get it. So it was kind of like you do your online store, and you're like the middleman, and you set it up, and then other people would come to your store with whatever you wanted to fill in it. If you were fishing, you do fishing, birds, electronics, whatever. And he was all excited about this because I think he thought he was going to make a lot of money. And lo and behold, the owner of this company came up with a lot of things, shut it down. My father-in-law lost a ton of money when we started really thinking, oh man, we do not want to be in a situation where it's desperate and they're going to potentially lose their house and get shuffled off to some place. So we thought we'd start addressing that now. And so my husband has two siblings, and one is in New York and one is in Pennsylvania. And so we're very close with the ones in New York. Uh, but we all started doing family meetings through, Zoom, Skype, whatever. And from there, we kind of set up this plan that, okay, kind of really, they were wavering a lot back and forth about, well, we think we can afford it. We're scraping by, but it's okay. And it was like they were one furnace crapping out away from, that's it. There's nothing left. They have no money to do anything with. So we tried to tackle it on our own, and we came up with a timeline, and we said, okay, March 2020, in a year, we're going to have you transitioned out of your house and into something different. We were thinking like, oh my gosh, we have to tackle the attic, the basement, this, second floor, everywhere and then where they live. And it's like, who? So, so basically we came up with a good plan, and we set up, canopy tents out in their yard with tables and sorting stations and all this stuff. My sister and brother-in-law came up from New York for like 4 days, and we just went to town on the second floor, and it was challenging. Challenging was a thing because they're here are my in-laws, um, wanting to see everything that's coming out and touch it and look at it, and "Oh, I wanna keep that," and they hadn't seen it for years, and it's like we're trying to shuffle it away, get it out so they don't even notice that we're doing it. And there was one scene where, my my sister-in-law, she went into the living room. I'm not exactly sure why, but they have these sort of footstool hassock things, and she just she went in, she's like, "That's going," because she's hated it because it sat there for 40 years,
Mhm.
as old as she is, and she
Uh-huh.
wanted it gone, and they had 2 of them that were kind of matching, and so she grabs one of them and hauls it outside, and then there comes, Nancy, is my mother-in-law. There comes Nancy, and she's like, "I wanna keep that." Like, "No, you don't need it. It's gross. It's disgusting. It smells like mildew. It makes my throat itch. No, I want it. It's good. We have to have somewhere to people sit." And it was like this whole thing. And then my my sister-in-law was upset. She doesn't get very upset very easily. And so went to my mother-in-law was mad. And so she goes to find my father-in-law, and she's literally tattling on my 38-year-old sister-in-law that, she took my hassock. She took my footstool.
Kathy, what was the breaking point with you and your in-laws? What was the straw that broke the camel's back when you realized, "Hey, I'm in over my head. There's no way I'm gonna be able to get this done," or for my own health and physical well-being, I don't know if I wanna do this at this point. What
Yeah,
happened?
okay, so it was the breaking point was this second round. So we try to tackle this main living area,
Mhm.
and my mother-in-law was under the impression that we were just moving all the stuff in the dining room upstairs for the move. I don't know, it was bizarre. And so we said no, and my sister-in-law, she comes out of the house. My mother-in-law was parked outside by a table, in her chair, and my sister-in-law comes out, and she's got these 2 ceramic, like decorative, like, white horses,
Mhm.
and she's walking out, and she's got them in both of her arms. She's, walking, and my mother-in-law just goes, "Oh, the white horses," like that. And my sister-in-law was like, "You're not keeping them." And then it was like game on Donkey Kong. From there on, it was like, my mother-in-law just got mad and angry and stormed off in the house and sat in her chair inside. And so we're trying to, get all of this done. I take off with my brother-in-law to the dump. We come back for, to continue because they were only here for a couple days. And my sister-in-law's packing stuff up, like, you know, like closing shop down. We're like, "What's going on?" She's like, "We're fired. They pretty much told us we can handle it from here, and we don't need you guys anymore." You know, everything I've done, to help them to get out of their house and not have to go into like a awful living situation. And
Why did you do that? I mean, just to be perfectly frank, why did you go there? Why did you go the extra mile? And we'll talk more about what that extra mile is because you certainly did go the extra mile, but why?
yeah, I it's who I am. I don't know, Brandon. It's like because I love, man. I don't want to see people suffer. And the consequence, me not acting, probably they would have ended up just being in their house until the bank came and took it.
Right. So,
I just don't
well,
wanna see that, for anybody. And yeah.
now that we're on this subject, why don't we just sort of dive right in? So, what made you reach out to LifeCycle and inadvertently find me, obviously, the transition expert? What when you realized that you were in over your head, what were you looking for, and what were you hoping for, ideally or realistically?
Um, help. I mean, I felt so I just remember, um, sitting back after, my brother and sister-in-law went back to New York, and it was like, "What are we gonna do?" Like, we are stopped, like, and there's no way that they can do this, and, on their own. And yeah,
Were
man,
you
I just remember sitting in the chair and thinking, "I have no idea." Um, I'm going to Google, hoarder specialist near me, and Life Cycle came up, and I clicked on it and started reading it, and I was like, "This is what we need. We need someone that's gonna help them take us out of it because we're just going to go at each other, and if we keep at this, people aren't going to talk to each other by the end. There won't be any relationship to have, so it wouldn't really matter. And so yeah, so I dialed and you answered. I thought you were the office administrator. I
So
really
I so
Yeah,
I
yeah,
answered that call, and we had a very good conversation, and it sounded like in that conversation, I sensed a lot of, tension, but I also sensed that you were very frustrated, um, with the situation and that you were looking for solutions, any solution, anything that sound feasible
yeah,
at that point. Would you agree?
yeah, absolutely. And I think, one of the things you said to me that made me feel like it's gonna be okay. Like I was so tired. I was so distraught and stressed and just I'm even getting a little teary thinking about it. It was like, oh my God, I'm at the end of me. We're at the end of us. And you just said, I gotcha. We got you. We can help you. Yes, we can. I'm
You
like, are
sure I
you
didn't say
sure?
anything more Mark Twainish like, or?
No, you really didn't. You're like, I got you. I know, like, I know it's really hard. And just talking to you, it was like, oh my gosh, I'm not crazy. This is more common than I think. There is help out there, and we don't have to do this alone because we can't. We're like, cut off at the knees.
Life cycle sort of encompasses and embodies that nature of how we adjust to change. Life cycle clients range from the son or daughter taking care of the affairs for their mom or dad, from a recent retiree anticipating getting their house ready for sale and all the hassles and hurdles that they're going to have to take a home that's been in the family for 30, 40 years, or to a client that maybe struggled with hoarding, and don't quite know who to call or how to call to get help. Is we're the family when the family isn't there. Whether it's just too much of a daunting task for your loved ones or yourself to handle, you contact us. We answer the call, and they're definitely the solution for you.
It took me like really just laying it out there.
How long was this process? Like a year, 2 years?
Yeah, so since COVID started was kind of well,
I mean, the mention of it was probably before that, right?
uh barely. That was kind of when, when it really started everything started coming to light as far as their financial situation because we had no idea it was
Excuse me.
as bad as it was.
So we, you know, getting an idea. I'm trying to get an idea of the dynamic, the relationship.
Yeah.
I think we all we garner what kind of personality Bob was, and one of the things that I told you about Bob is, you know, your way of dealing with things, being a more confrontational person, head on, shoot from the hip, isn't the way that Bob is, and Bob doesn't necessarily embrace social cues the way most people would.
Mhm.
He doesn't understand the awkwardness, or when maybe something is taken uh as an insult, because it's just the way his personality is, but also maybe other underlying issues that may have never been diagnosed with him. But I noticed that, everything he did would get a reaction from you, and I can't say that he got a gratification from it, but he was unscathed by your emotions to what he was doing.
Uh,
And I wanted to caution you and warn you and sort of cradle you away from taking that, going down that path, because it was just going to take a lot of stress out of you, and all the energy that you needed, we
mm,
needed to reserve for the path ahead, because we had a long work journey. There was a lot that needed to be done in a very short period of time. And knowing what you were up against, we wanted to sort of mitigate some of those fights as much as possible. Um, Knowing Bob, we got Bob down. We figured out the best way to deal with Bob and how to sort of usher him down the process. Tell me what your reaction was with Nancy, though. What was Nancy's personality like? What's Nancy like in this whole equation?
um, I we've talked about this, and I feel like I mean, without a doubt, has a hoarding disorder.
Hmm.
But as far as her personality, it was very hard to figure her out for a lot of years, until one day, our son was diagnosed with being on the spectrum and the autistic spectrum, and it hit me like, oh dear God, that's what's going on with Nancy. I think that Nancy is on the spectrum, never diagnosed,
Mhm.
because she is kind of socially awkward at times, and you don't really know exactly what you're getting, and it's almost like the world is very stressful to her, and she kind of navigates it with a kind of a script and how you go along, and you
Is
just
it
walk along and you keep doing what you're supposed to do.
almost like sort of robotically, would you say? Not
Kind of,
non-emotional?
yeah, like even if she was upset about something, maybe she would just like, this is what I'm supposed to do, and so I'll keep doing it.
Mhm.
Even if it doesn't I don't enjoy it, I don't like it, that's just what I'm supposed to do in this situation, and I'll just do it and keep doing it till I die.
Right. So
Does that make sense?
makes perfectly good sense, but it's these but those both their personalities are usually, from my experience, the personalities that really don't fare very well when it comes to transitioning.
Yep.
They're more susceptible to stay in these predicaments and these situations and circumstance for a very prolonged period of time because of their inability to socialize. I mean, not really socialize, but to communicate some of their headaches and frustrations. They rather just shuttle. They rather just sort of step back and sort of go into a bit of a shell and sort of deflect any intrusion of someone trying to get them or persuade them any direction.
Yeah.
Um, but in this case, we were able to do something entirely different. Let's talk a little bit about the actual transition at this point. Now that we've talked about the two personalities, both Bob and Nancy, your parents-in-law, your in-laws rather. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Um, you know,
And can I
did you
add
say?
one thing about my mother-in-law, is that, sometimes I think that she has learned that how you maybe get what you want is, even if it's better to placate people and to just kind of nod like you're gonna comply, but she doesn't.
So it's sort of like the deflective.
Yeah, yep,
I mean,
completely, yeah,
it doesn't make for a confrontation because they're not accusing or they're not fighting you, but
correct,
they're basically telling you what you want to hear so that they get more time.
and they can
Uh,
just, yeah, you'll leave them alone.
and you leave them alone.
Yeah,
Um, let's talk about the transition. When we met, we outlined a number of options, as we do with all of our clients with LifeCycle. And as a transition expert, I sit down and I look at all three options. Option A, in your case, was let's see what we can do to renovate, fix the house up, get the house on the market, and get it sold for the highest top dollar value, based on comparables. Option two was, option one, let's back up. Option one was let's look at the equity play in the home. Let's look at what's owed. Let's look at the family's financial situation, portfolio, or everything involved with what they owe, what they have, what they're bringing in, taxes included, monthly expenses, and look at the repairs of the home and see if we can address any of those issues so that they can stay in the home. And option two would be, like we said, look at fair market value, look at the comparables on what the houses up the street around the corner, and renovate the house, making it a little bit more modern for whatever that palette's going to be based on the market. But also address the hoarding situation. Then look at what other alternatives there will be for them to be able to move into alternate living.
mm,
And then we looked at option three, which was, the home rescue program, which is designed for clients that don't have the time, money, energy, and resources. Will help and aid with, finding a house, an apartment, a condo, a mobile home, moving you into that environment, unpacking you, but meanwhile addressing the hoarding situation, or not just necessarily a hoarding situation. After 40, 50 years in a home, or 50, 60 years in a home, by sheer definition, you're going to have an enormous attachment to a lot of the belongings and the things that are in that home, be that as it may, the memories and all the other things that go with being in a home for that period of a time. We were going to address that, but also look for a buyer, find a buyer, get the home acquired as is, and find you a new living environment and move you. Of those three options, what were the three options that you guys decided to choose, and sort of tell why?
Um, well, I think I can't remember which number it was you said, but we opted to do the buyout buyback program with through you.
So the home rescue program.
The home rescue program, yeah, because shoot, it made the most sense with the amount of work that needed to be done just to get them out of the house,
Mhm.
um, and then trying to find someone to buy it, and all the moving parts of all of that, it was so overwhelming. And just we know that we knew that they needed to be out of the home. There was no, it wasn't feasible for them to stay in it. Their age as well, and it's 4 acres, 5 acres to tend to as well. And the house is old and needed lots of upkeep. So yeah, so we decided that would be probably the least stressful and
Now,
the most beneficial.
what was some of the when this was presented to Bob and Nancy, um, what were their reactions to it? I mean, I see how it made sense for you and your husband and maybe even your sister-in-law, but what was Bob and Nancy's reaction to this?
Well, I think my father-in-law, um,
Well, first off, let me ask you this question too,
yeah,
Kathy, while you're thinking of that answer. How bad was their financial situation? I mean, how much time did they have to stay in the home?
uh, oh, not like I said, if anything went wrong, that would be. I mean, they might have been able to pull it off for a year or two.
Okay. And what was this what kind of
That's without
saving
anything breaking or anything happening.
what was their savings like? I mean, how invested were they with their savings? I mean, did they do a good I mean, I know Bob
Yeah,
invested a lot of his money in these investments, but did he have much savings
no,
available?
no. I mean, to like, I don't know if we talking numbers, very very low. Um, like too low. I mean, so basically they were living off of Social Security.
Okay, and this is a bit a dramatic turn of events compared to the
Um,
Bob that was responsible, lived his entire work life as a
yes,
professional that saved and put his money away. Um, the timetable from when he lost all of his money, would you say would it be 3 years, 4 years, two years, or was it over a gradual 10-year time
it
period?
might have been over like 10 years.
Okay.
I think the market and the investments, however that went, but all I can say is I know that they were going to be set, and we were going to get a nice inheritance when he retired.
Mhm.
And then now we're at the point where we just don't want to cost. We have to limit the
You have to stop the
what it's gonna
bleeding.
stop the bleeding, because
Yeah.
it's like, and he still wants to try to make money quick.
Alright, so Bob so even after the
Ah,
situation with the investment, Bob still has a thirst for investing still, it sounds.
yeah, we got after him because it had to do with cryptocurrency, and I was like, "Oh my god, I can't even believe this." And um, I think that when it comes down to it, he probably feels embarrassed, and he wants to be able to leave like a better financial legacy. Um,
So he wants to redeem himself, it sounds like.
Pretty much, but it's only digging a hole and making it worse, and, it's very hard to get that for him to understand that.
Mhm.
Um,
W What advice would you give to other I mean, because everything we do here in the show is about giving advice and taking these circumstances and situations and learning from it. What advice would you give to, someone who's a daughter-in-law in a case like yours where they're dealt with this situation, they have to downsize their parents and their in-laws? It sounds like you were a lot more vocal in this situation than maybe your husband.
mhm.
Um, what advice would you give to someone who's in the same situation trying to encourage and support their in-laws to make the best decision?
Dang, that's a really hard one, Brandon. I mean, you know, man, I mean, my advice would be long before you get to where you're at now, come up with a plan. Come up with like, go over their finance things, talk about that with them. If you have that relationship,
Mhm.
um, kind of get all this stuff like seriously set and address like, hey, what are you going to do if when we get to this point, like at this point, we need to pull the trigger for this next phase or something because it's like,
Right.
dang, I wish we would have done that.
Well, I mean, let me give you some insight on my end. I've been doing this for over 12 years, and one of the thing, and I've done over 1,000 transitions. One of the things that I think we as a society need to do a better job at is at educating and awareness.
Yeah.
We need to talk more about things like aging in place. Long-term living
Mm.
solutions. Do you have a long-term healthcare insurance policy? Do you know how much money do you have in your savings? Because in a lot of cases, the burden is gonna be not just on the son, in their case, their son, but it's also gonna be in the
Mhm.
daughter-in-law. And you wanna have those conversations right before they go or right when they're in retirement, maybe before they go to retirement, to make sure that they're prepared for retirement. And in a case like this, having that conversation with them couldn't have hurt 20 years ago to say, I know, Bob, you want to invest in all these different things, but as a precautionary tale, um, sometimes if you spend all those resources and you don't budget accordingly, there's gonna come a time that you're gonna rely on that money. And if it's not there for you to be able to stay in your home, you might lose your home. You might not be able to stay in this home because the impression that I got from Bob and both Nancy is that they wanted to die in this home. They wanted to live
Yep.
their last years in this home. But they're not alone because last I looked, that 85% of Americans want to live and die in their home. A home that they spent 50, 40 years paying a mortgage on, deservingly feel that they should be able to live out their last days in this home. But due to inflation, due to taxes, due to insurances, due to all these other upkeeps, wear and tear, maintenance, they find themselves in a very precarious situation where they're dealt with making decisions. Do I do a reverse mortgage?
Mhm.
Um, do I sell my home or do I go into an assisted living? And if you are going into an assisted living, what are the costs for an assisted living? I mean, in a case like Bob and Nancy, if you weren't creative in looking for alternative living solutions, could they afford to go into an assisted living?
No. Well, whatever Medicare would pay for.
Right. Well, in a case
That's
like
it.
this, because you're in New Hampshire and this is all private paid for the most part,
Yeah.
um, did you even consider or look at what those costs were going to be at one point or another?
Um, no. My sister-in-law might have looked up, certain certain things. Yeah, but I can't
Well,
I don't even think we kinda bothered because it's
you
just
knew
not feasible.
you knew the
Oh,
financial situation. So, I mean, anywhere between 35 to 10,000, $12,000 per month.
yeah.
And even if they had certain, but if they had a long-term insurance policy, they would have gotten that 100%. A lot of what I do is try to educate people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. Make these decisions with your finances and do these things the right way so that when you end up at 60, 70, 80, you have enough money put aside so that you can now afford to live the way you want to live. Bob and Nancy deserve to be able to live in their home and to die in their home. But unfortunately, the circumstances that Bob put them in, unfortunately, didn't allow for it to happen that way. And maybe if Bob would have known that, maybe he would have been a little bit more conservative in some of his choices. Maybe not. Maybe Bob is just designed to be who Bob is. But we all need to know that there's a consequence for not having that nest egg the way that you want it to when you want to retire comfortably the way you want to.
Mm.
Um, what you did for them was nothing shy of a miracle. I mean, we did our part, but you did your part. You reached out to us, you contacted us, you put aside, your indifferences with Bob. You swallowed your pride on more than one occasions. I literally watched Bob take a few digs here or there, and I saw you bite your tongue. I mean, you didn't bite it all the time. Let's be honest. You did
No.
not bite it all the time, but for the most part, you understood the journey and what was required to get us to the promised land. Um, Nancy, let's talk a little bit about that transition process. I mean, the technicians were down there with Bob and Nancy, working with them for over a month. What was it like? Was it what you thought that process was going to be, or was it, a little easier than you expected?
I would say that, it was at first, it was sort of like I thought that maybe we had to be around more, but it
Mhm.
was very nice to just, be able to back off and check out and let the guys, the team do their thing. And, Bob and Nancy really liked them
Mhm.
and enjoyed having them there and, um, telling, Bob liked telling all the stories about all the things they were finding and kind of it was sort of that interesting, journey for them, remembering all kinds of stuff, probably more so Bob than Nancy.
Yeah, I mean, peeling away 50 years of history and memories is a very hard thing to do.
Yeah.
You wish that it was a perfect science that you can just sort of go in and it gets done a certain kind of way. I mean, all the way to I think the last day of the project, we were putting things in certain areas that we wish that we would have kept away because
Oh,
it was just a rush to get things
yeah.
done. So we managed to deal with the hoarding situation. We were able to separate things, donate things, and package things that were going to be temporarily moved. In the case like Bob and Nancy, they had a temporary apartment that you secured for them
Mhm.
in town, and as they waited for their permanent residency in the mobile home to be finished completed
Yeah.
to finish being completed
Yeah.
rather. And so we got them out of the home and we actually got to the closing table, got the property finally sold. It wasn't without consequence. It was a lot of work to get the titles and things of that nature
Yeah.
because of how old the home was. And we managed through the home rescue program to get the property sold. We got you guys got them temporarily out of the home. We dealt with the hoarding. Um, at this point, you know, um, how do you feel? How are you feeling at that point when we got to the point where everything was finalized? Share with us a little bit about what that felt like.
Um, we could have it was my husband and I were just talking about it the other day, like, um, man, they're out of their house. I can't believe it. Like, it's done, it's sold, they're in their apartment. Like, what a relief. Like, that was a gigantic hurdle. And it's kind of shocking when I think about that it happened. Like, we have a whole other, thing in front of us, getting them into their new mobile home and dealing with the vast amount of things they still kept. But they're out, and that was amazing. I don't. I knew it was possible, but you kind of at times you think that there's no way this is really going to happen.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, yeah. There's
No,
not a lot of words. Like we couldn't have done it without help from LifeCycle.
well, I appreciate that. Thank you. I mean, a lot of when we came up with the name, Life Cycle Transitions, and we referred to ourselves as a transition company. A lot of people didn't understand exactly what that meant. They thought that it was too vague and it really didn't explain. They were confused. Transition from what? But knowing what we know and what you know, would you consider what Bob and Nancy, as well as you and your husband, went through a transition?
Huge, gigantic,
Mhm.
like one of those, life changes, right up there with getting married, having a kid, a death, divorce, huge. Moving to the other part of the country, like a gigantic transition. Yeah.
Well, you represent the majority of the country. I mean, at some point or another, we're all guaranteed to do one of two things: either to pass away or to get old and eventually pass away. Um, it's just as morbid as it may sound,
Yeah, it's true.
so with that being said, we we're all gonna have to make tough decisions. We're gonna have to make tough decisions, tough choices, and we pray that we have a good support base around us to help us with those choices. You and Bob didn't have the best relationship, but you represent a lot of other scenarios that other people that are going through rough relationships with their in-laws, far worse than yours.
Yeah.
That unfortunately, if something were to happen to your husband, and I've seen the scenarios like this, I've seen it where the husband passes away and the person who's left to deal with the situation is the daughter-in-law that never got along with the mother-in-law.
Ah! That'd be awful.
Yeah, and the two women, because as we know, unfortunately, women do live longer than men, are now left to sort of battle it out or work through their indifferences.
Ugh.
Eh,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I think you are lucky to avoid that circumstances because by the grace of God, Bob is still with us, and so is your husband.
Yeah.
But you still had to make do with the tough choices that were ahead of you, and try to get everyone aboard was not an easy undertaking. I think you handled it very well. I think you did it, like you said, from a loving place. um, you swallowed a lot of the deep rooted resentment that I think you felt in the earlier stages of your relationship, feeling that
Mm.
maybe you weren't as appreciated as you felt like you should have. And I would agree. I think at times Bob could have been a little bit more nicer to you. Could have been a little bit more appreciative. He could have been a little bit more thankful
Mm.
that you made the phone call to LifeCycle or companies like a LifeCycle to even consider it, because you could have turned your head and went the other way and said, "I'll just pick up the pieces when they get to that point," but you didn't.
Mm.
And you know, I before we go, I want you to just sort of tell us, what's your secret? What was your secret in this case to getting through this rough transition with Bob and Nancy? How did you get through every day? What was your motivation?
It's funny. One thing to say. I think that my relationship with my in-laws has actually improved. Oddly enough, through all of this.
Wow.
Well, I just it has those points, but there's I think more of a freedom to that I can tell them how I'm feeling, and they'll either hear it or not hear it. But even my mother-in-law, she said something when I popped by one day. She's like, "I really love it when you come over. You just brighten up my day." And I was like, "What?" Uh,
Mhm.
and just her acknowledging, they were sick with COVID recently. Thank God they're fine.
Yeah.
And so, but I was like, made them some food and brought them stuff that they needed. And she made some comment about like, "You're really good to us." And I thought, man, that felt good, because it was sincere. Because I really was trying to be good to them, despite all the hurt feelings I might feel, trying
Mhm.
to put trying to put those aside.
Mhm.
And one thing that you had said to me during this process was uh, that sort of come to Jesus moment about out in the yard, not don't not to waste my time and energy trying to get something from Bob that I'll never get, and but to focus on that this is love to my husband and my sister-in-law, my brother-in-law, and all of us.
Mhm.
Like no matter how they respond, this is a service and kind of an act of love for
Mhm.
all of them because it's going to pay off in the end,
Mhm.
because my relationship, like, I don't know, just the relationships are better, even with them. We're closer now because of all this and just so many stories and things we laugh about it. But um, I don't know, just yeah, try. I guess the thing that would I would keep running through my head is, all right, Kathy, are you being kind? You need to be kind. Um, You can give it to them when they need it, but be kind, you know? And that
You're
was kinda my little mantra in my head of, like, am I being kind and gracious, or am I, being a snarky ass?
No, I mean, I think you were being real. You're being human, and that's
Mm,
what you expect in a situation where it requires, a pulse. It requires someone with a heart that loves and feels pain to experience what you were experiencing. I mean, it's not to be a robot and not to be afflicted by someone who's not really necessarily showing you the same amount of care. But I've been doing this for 12 years, and uh, trust me, it's always difficult when you do all these things for people, and they don't always appreciate it. They don't
mm,
always understand what goes into it. But I always tell people that patience, most of the time, is people believing that I'm not gonna blow up. I'm not gonna say the things that I wanna say, and that's my definition, or
mm,
that's what I should tap myself on the shoulder for as being patient. But in all actuality, sometimes patience is about being patient for other people where they are
mm,
in their life and to give them the time that they need, not you, to grow, mature, and evolve and to not intervene in that. And I think that was kind of what you did in your cases. Um, you let them be who they were in times, but in the moments where you needed to sort of get them back on track, I think you redirected their energies in the right way. But if I were to specify or to really try to sort of illuminate why this process turned out so favorable, I would say that it was because you loved them, and you showed them love even when it wasn't always received. But when I told you out in the backyard that day, yeah, I meant it from the bottom of my heart. I said, Kathy, you can't expect them to ever appreciate this. You do it for yourself, you do it for your husband, you do it for your sister-in-law, you do it for your kids, their grandkids.
mm,
And all of those things are the reason, and all of those things are going to be the only reason why the right things happen, because they're not going to get to that point. And at some point or another, as we all get older, we don't see a lot of things the same way as
mm,
people who are more in the act of it, dealing with it on a day-to-day basis. The shuffle of life is very overwhelming, and in a case like theirs, getting older is a very difficult challenge when you don't have the same control financially, physically, and emotionally. So kudos to you. If there's anyone watching or listening to this show, what they should be able to extract from this show is that working with your loved ones is a very difficult thing to deal with. But when you see the situation as being unsustainable, don't give up. Continue to fight that good fight. Continue to look for resources in your neighborhood, in your community. If there isn't a life cycle transitions there, then look for other resources. Contact your local council on aging or
mm,
community centers or resources but don't just turn away, and not do anything. Use Kathy as an example, someone who stayed the course, who continued to fight that good fight, and didn't relent. And because of that, I wanted you to be on the show because I wanted to champion your accomplishments, your success. Because the reason this was done, Kathy, is because of you. And if Bob and Nancy can't say thank you, then I'll say it for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, because you really made this thing happen. You stayed the course. You gave us all the insight, all the direction. You were a person that we can confide in when we really didn't know exactly what the best direction was. And because of you, Bob and Nancy are where they are. And may God bless your soul for that.
you're the best, Brandon, thank you.
No, thank you so much. So I'll let you go. Thank you again for being on the show, Kathy.
Yeah,
We'll chime in later. And once again, thank you so much for being on the show. And this is another episode of the Transition Expert with LifeCycle Transitions. Thank you so much.